Okay, student, it's another day. Welcome to biology lesson. It is Darasa online. My name is Mr. Laurent Ndonji. I'm going to continue presenting to you our interesting topic of ecology. Hope we will be together in this lesson. Therefore, my student, our topic is ecology. And for today, I'm going to present to you methods of studying ecology. How is ecology studied? Which techniques are used in studying ecology? My students, ecological studies involves data collection, involves analysis of the collected data, and also presentation of the analyzed data. My student, ecological studies can be quantitative or qualitative, sometimes both. My student, ecological studies can be quantitative, ecological studies, quantitative, or can be qualitative. What I'm saying is ecological studies, my student. In the first lesson, we defined what is ecology. That we deal with organism with the environment. Therefore, the data of organisms are collected. Therefore, this data which are collected, ecological data, can be also quantitative data, or qualitative data. What is quantitative data? My student, assume you are collecting the data of organism. In your collection, you count organisms. If you count what you are doing, the kind of data which you'll be collecting is quantitative data. Therefore, quantitative data this involves counting and measurements. You count the number of organisms, you measure also. That is quantitative data. But if you start describing things, that is qualitative data. Therefore, qualitative data, this involves description of things. Description of things. My student, you always describe different things. That is qualitative data. My students, data are collected. Therefore, in ecology, there is a collection of what, my student? Collection of data. After collecting data, data are analyzed. Therefore, there is analysis of the collected data. After analyzing the data, there is a presentation now of the data. Now in the presentation, we will study many things as we go on. My students, how data are collected. Data may be collected directly. Therefore, there is a direct method of collecting data. Maybe direct counting, if we are dealing with the quantitative. Direct counting. Where here You will observe observation. So there you count. You can count organism in a photograph. Photographs also. You count. Sometimes you can use a flame called a quadrant, where it is slowly randomly. Then organisms within a flame are counted. Therefore, so we can use quadrants. Okay, students. Now, some other methods of studying ecology or of collecting ecological data are indirect. Therefore, we can have indirect method of data collection. Indirect method. For example, as we go on, we will study one method called capture, recapture. This is the indirect method of estimating population size. We will go on, we will study as we go on. Now, my students, how are ecological data collected? How are they collected? Therefore, if we want to know the detail of data collection, we have to learn another concept. And the concept is called sampling. Therefore, let us check the concept of sampling. Now, I have prepared to you guiding question. Let us start with question number 1. Explain how each of the following techniques are used in sampling. A. Simple random sampling. B. Systematic random sampling. And C. Stratified random sampling. What are these? If you want to respond properly to this question, student, it's good to know what is sampling. Student, take an example. You have 100 individuals. You want to study their character. Can you study each individual? Really, it will take you time. It will cost you to study all 100 individuals. What you will do, you will select just a small number of individuals to represent a total of 100. Okay. My students, take an example. You are an ecological investigator. You are studying how particular trees reproduce. Take an example. How trees of different kinds reproduce. You have 1,000 trees. These are trees. Will you study all 1,000 trees? Really, it will take you time to study. It will cost you to study all 1,000 trees. But what you will do, you will select a sample. You will select a small number of trees. It will represent 1,000 what? Trees. Now the selected one are called sample. What is the sampling? My student, now, the process of selecting a small group to represent the entire group is what we call sampling. Therefore, this is the process now of selecting small group from a large group to represent the characteristics of the entire population. Entire population is what we call sampling. A small group, a small portion is selected to represent the characters of entire population. Hope we are together. Now a small group selected is called sample. Therefore my student here, we can have now a definition of sample. Sample is a small group drawn from the large group to represent the characteristics of the entire population. Of the entire population. Characteristics of the entire my students. Now from there, if we go back to our question, we asked how each of these techniques are used in sampling. Simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, and stratified random sampling. What are these? These are methods of sampling. They are techniques of sampling. Therefore we call them techniques of what? Sampling. If we start with A we asked is simple random sampling. How is it done? How is it carried out? It is simple random sampling from the word random. That means here representative sample are selected randomly. In a population, every member of a population has an equal chance of being selected. Therefore here, each member has an equal chance of being selected. My students, for example, you can have computer-generated numbers. Or you can have a table of random numbers, which can be picked randomly. Therefore here, as an ecological investigator, you have no room of having a certain interest to a particular member. All individuals have an equal chance of being included in your sample. For example, if you use a table of random numbers, a number will be picked randomly without you to know. Hope you are following my student. Now my student, in simple random sampling, quadrant frame is used. We will see as we go on. This quadrant frame which is used is slowly randomly. Then individuals within a frame are counted and recorded. You see, a flame is slowly randomly. Therefore, there is no selection. That is how we use simple random sampling in data collection. My student, can you use this? You can use. You can have numbers written randomly, then individuals will pick computer generated numbers. You can have Every member in a population has an equal chance of being selected. Therefore, you can use this when sampling flora and fauna. Hope you are following my students. Now, if we go to part B, systematic random sampling. My student, systematic. Here, the sample is collected at a regular interval. Therefore, here, you must have a regular interval where your sample is collected. Let's say you collect your sample after 500 meters. There is an interval which you have made. My students, in systematic random sampling, as an ecological investigator, you must have a starting point. Starting point, which is selected by an ecological investigator. Therefore, a starting point will be selected by an ecological investigator and also a regular interval. My student, suppose you have an area. Let's say this is an area A. In area A, you want just to sample to a particular distance, a defined distance. Let's say you want to sample only the distance of 100 meters. Then here you will have interval. Let's say you will be taking your sample after 20 meters. Therefore, after 20 meters, you take your sample. After 20 meters, you take your sample. After 20 meters, you take your sample until your 100 meters which you have over. Therefore, my students, in systematic random sampling, a transect is used. As we go on, we will know the detail of transect. A transect connects between 2 points. Therefore, here, my students, you find one point is here, you find the other point is here. Then a string may be placed here. But this one will have a specified distance. Are you following, my student? Therefore, a string which is placed here will form a line. Therefore, this one is called a line transect, connecting this point and this point. Then the sampling will be taken along this line, but at a defined interval. Hope you are following. Therefore, in systematic random sampling, you must have a defined interval. You must have a starting point. Student, are you following? Let us have this example. You have 100 individuals. You want to use systematic random sampling. These individuals are arranged in a linear way. Let's say they are arranged in a linear way. You want now to use systematic random sampling. How are we going to do? as an ecological investigator, select a starting point. Therefore, we will select a starting what? Point. Let's say we will start selecting an individual 5. After counting, then individual 5 is taken as a sample. Thereafter, you will select the interval. Let's say our interval is 8. If we go together here, individual number 5 will be taken as a sample, number 13, number 21, 29, 37, 45, 53, 61, 69, 77, 85, and 93. How many individuals are there in your sample? Let us count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Therefore, from 100, we have only 12 individuals which will represent 100 individuals. Hope you are following, my student. Remember, we have selected a starting point. We have also an interval. Are we together? Therefore, that is all about systematic random sampling. Keep on studying different biological books. We'll get more information about systematic random sampling. Now, student, let us see stratified random sampling. Stratified. I remember in Form 3 geography, you are taught the word strata, physical geography, strata. This is a plural of the word stratum. Therefore, stratum is a singular. In geography, you are told these are layers. Now here, strata or stratum as a singular, we mean subdivision. Therefore, here, my student, the population which you want to sample is divided into several subgroups. If you are using this, divide the population into different subgroups. How do you divide the population? You divide the population basing on the character. For example, maybe children of 5 years old are placed in a particular group. 10 years old, 20 years old. Therefore, you divide the population. Hope you are following, my student. Then after dividing, select a sample from each subgroup. Together, my student, you select a sample from each subgroup. Therefore, each subgroup will have a representative member. That is stratified. Now, my students, take an example now. We have a population From this population, an ecological investigator divided into several subgroups. This is one subgroup, having individuals of a particular character. This is another subgroup. This is another subgroup. Then from this subgroup, representative members are selected, called sample. Therefore, sample is taken here, sample is taken here, and also sample is taken here. Hope you are following, my student. That is the way to use stratified random sampling. Select a sample from each subgroup. Hope you have understood how to use these techniques of sampling. For more information, you can pass through various books, especially biological science and Thai biology. Now, question number 2. Why is it advantageous to use each of the following sampling techniques? A. Simple random sampling. B. Systematic random sampling. And C. Stratified random sampling. If we want to respond properly to this question, also start by defining the term sampling. Then you are asked the advantages. Therefore, you go directly to the advantages of simple random sampling if you are responding. But for here, my student, I want to explain more about simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, and stratified random sampling before we answer this question. Let us start with simple random sampling. As I said to the question number 1, in simple random sampling, sample is selected randomly. Therefore, every individual in a population has an equal chance of being selected. Together, my student? Now, what are the advantages of using simple random sampling? My student, if every member has equal chances of being selected, is this technique biased? No, it's not biased. Therefore, this method here is free from bias. Therefore, no personal biasness may be introduced because each individual has an equal chance of being selected. Student, are we together? My student, is this method requires much knowledge? Really no. Because every individual in a population has an equal chance of being selected. Therefore, it requires just a minimum knowledge. Therefore, number 2 here, this one here requires minimum knowledge. Hope you are following, my student. Therefore, when the population is uniform, it is very good to use random sampling. Therefore, if you go through different books, you will see many advantages of simple random sampling. Then, my student, if we go to part B, systematic random sampling. Systematic random sampling, as I said earlier, there is a starting point. Therefore, as an ecological investigator, you select a starting point. Then you must have an interval. From our question now, what are the advantages of using systematic random sampling? My student, this one is simple to use. Simple to use. Why? Because you have to select a starting point, you have to select an interval. Therefore, you can cover a wide area. Hope you are following, my student. Therefore, it ensures coverage of a large area. Hope you are following, my student. Now, if you can add more when you read books. If we go to advantages now of stratified sampling. Advantages of stratified random sampling. Why do we call stratified random sampling? Because after dividing the population, individuals from subgroups is selected randomly. Therefore, advantages of this, my students, this stratified random sampling is very useful when studying heterogeneous population. Heterogeneous population. That means the population having members of different characters. Therefore, it allows the comparison and the correlation. Okay, student. Therefore, in stratified sampling, comparison and the correlation among members of the population can be made. Hope you can add more advantages of stratified random sampling. My student, let us have this additional information that in stratified sampling, is used when the population is heterogeneous. What is heterogeneous? The word hetero means difference. Therefore, population is having members of different characters. Therefore, when you are sampling a population which have members of different characters, use stratified sampling. But when you have a population which is uniform, homogeneous members are present, you can use simple random you can also use systematic random sampling. Systematic random sampling. Therefore, students, simple random sampling, as we said before, it is free from bias, requires minimum knowledge, and also ensures a high degree of representatives. But systematic random sampling, we said, is simple to use, and also it ensures coverage of large area. You can use this when you are studying uniform population. That means the population having individuals of the same characters. Hope you are following, my students. Now, my student, let us add this question which we can discuss here together. What are the disadvantages of each sampling technique? Disadvantages of each random sampling technique. Then from there we can conclude which sampling technique is more useful, good than the other. Therefore, let us start with disadvantages. of simple random sampling. What are the disadvantages of this? At the beginning I said in simple random sampling, every member in a population has an equal chance of being selected. Therefore here, as a researcher can miss to get a correct representative sample. As a researcher may fail to get a correct representative members. Therefore, minority selected may not represent the entire population correctly. Entire population collective may not. Sometimes may fail to represent the character of the entire population collective. My student, if you have a population which is heterogeneous, can you apply simple random sampling? Really is not applicable. Therefore, it is not applicable. It is not applicable when the population is heterogeneous. Heterogeneous means a population having members of different characters. You cannot apply simple random sampling. Pass through different books are the more disadvantages of simple random sampling. My students, what are the disadvantages of using systematic random sampling? The disadvantages of using this. As previously I said, in systematic random sampling, a sample is selected at a regular interval. You must have a starting point. What are the disadvantages of using this? Really, it is also not applicable when the population is heterogeneous. The population is heterogeneous. My students, since you have a starting point, you have also a regular interval. This do not include all members. Therefore, the method is biased. Since not all members of the population can be included in the sample. Therefore, the method is biased. Hope you are following, my student. You can pass through different books of biology. You will get more disadvantages of systematic random sampling. My students, let us finish up now the disadvantages of stratified random sampling. Have said is called stratified random sampling because the population is divided into several subgroups. Then from each subgroup, a sample is taken randomly. What are the disadvantages of this? My student, if you want to conduct this, first you must be aware about the subgroups. Therefore, it requires much knowledge. You must be aware about the strata, each stratum in the population. Therefore, this one, my student, it requires what? It requires much knowledge. And also, my student, to divide the population into several subgroups, then taking a sample from each subgroup, really, it consumes the time. Hope you are following my students. Now, students, I'm sure you can define correctly the term sampling, the term sample. You can also explain how simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, and stratified random sampling can be conducted. Hope you can use this in the field. And also, you know now the advantages and disadvantages of each sampling technique. Now, my students, in the next lesson, my student will learn about the transect and the quadrant. How we use the transect and the quadrant in sampling flora and fauna. We learn how we can use a string to record the occurrence of organisms in an ecosystem, and also how we can use a quadrant. A quadrant may be a flame, maybe a pin flame, maybe permanent quadrant. Therefore, in the next lesson, we will see also how to calculate different aspects of species distribution. We will see species frequency, species density, species cover in the next lesson. And also we will discuss in detail how we can use quadrant and the transect in sampling all plants and animals. And also in the other lesson we will check how we can estimate population size using capture recapture technique. Hope you will enjoy the lesson. Keep on following. See you. Bye bye.